On May 22, 2011, the quiet city of Joplin, located in the southwest part of the state of Missouri, was living an apparently normal routine. With about 50,000 residents, Joplin was known for its hospitality, stable economy, and peaceful life. But that tranquility would be brutally interrupted by one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history. In the early afternoon, the sky began to darken earlier than usual, as if a giant cloud were covering the entire region. Local authorities had already been monitoring a strong storm in the area, but no one imagined the scale of the chaos about to unfold. Violent winds began to blow, followed by heavy rains and terrifying thunderclaps. Residents reported feeling pressure in the air, as if something huge were about to happen. By 5:41 p.m. local time, the phenomenon touched the ground with unprecedented force. It was a tornado classified as EF5, the highest category on the enhanced Fujita scale. With estimated winds above 320 kilometers per hour, it swept everything in its path, destroying homes, trees, and even ripping asphalt off the streets. The destruction path was approximately 6 kilometers wide and 22 kilometers long. Within minutes, Joplin turned into a war zone. The St. John's Regional Medical Center was among the most affected sites, with patients needing urgent evacuation. From that moment on, the city entered a process of mourning, rebuilding, and constant remembrance of what had happened. In the first hours after the tornado, chaos reigned in Joplin. Many residents searched desperately for news of missing or injured family members. Phone lines were overloaded, and social networks became the main source of communication. Bodies were found among the debris, while rescue teams worked against the clock. More than 7,000 buildings were damaged or completely destroyed. The city's infrastructure was severely affected, with power outages and lack of clean water. The municipal airport also suffered damage, complicating the arrival of external aid. Emergency centers were quickly set up, offering shelter and medical assistance to the population. Stories of survivors marked moments of both miracles and tragedy. A baby only 8 weeks old was found trapped among the rubble for hours. She was rescued alive and became a symbol of hope amid the chaos. But not all stories ended well. By then, the death toll had already surpassed 100 people, and many were still missing. The days that followed were dedicated almost entirely to searching for survivors and bodies. Specialized rescue teams arrived from various states to help with the operations. Dogs trained to detect human scent, drones, and movement detectors were used in critical areas. Each pile of debris was carefully overturned in search of anyone still alive. The national and international response was immediate. President Barack Obama declared a federal emergency, releasing resources for Missouri. Humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross and Salvation Army sent immediate aid. Trucks loaded with food, water, blankets, and medical supplies began arriving constantly. Volunteers from other cities came to help with cleanup and distribution of supplies. Internet users shared information and helped locate missing persons through hashtags such as #JoplinTornado, which became a global trend on Twitter. This global solidarity showed the power of unity in times of crisis. As the days passed, the city entered a new phase: reconstruction. Rubble was removed, and the first efforts to rebuild houses and public buildings began. Government officials launched programs to encourage sustainable and safe construction. New building codes were adopted to ensure resistance to future disasters. Schools were rebuilt or restored, guaranteeing children could return to classes as soon as possible. Small businesses faced great challenges, but many reopened with community support. Parks and squares were revitalized to give Joplin back its identity as a welcoming city. The tornado of Joplin served as a harsh reminder of the importance of preparedness against natural disasters. Studies conducted after the event revealed flaws in warning systems and public awareness. Despite weather alerts, many residents did not take them seriously, thinking the tornado wouldn't reach them. This led to reflection on how to improve the effectiveness of warnings and public education. The National Weather Service improved its communication methods, using clearer language and emphasizing the severity of danger. Investment in emergency sirens and mobile notification systems increased. Other cities reviewed their contingency plans and emergency simulations, ensuring better preparation for future events. Memories of the disaster remain deeply rooted in the lives of the residents. Ceremonies are held annually to honor the victims. Plaques with names of those who died were installed in strategic locations throughout the city. A permanent memorial was built to preserve the story and honor those who left. Artists created murals and works inspired by the strength of the Joplin people. Books, documentaries, and films have been produced telling the story of the tornado and its lessons. Students learn early on about the tragedy and the community's reaction. Museums display pieces and testimonies recounting the day everything changed. Joplin not only survived, it evolved. The city today is more modern, better prepared, and more united than ever. Urban planning projects gave way to broader, safer public spaces. New schools were built with advanced technology and resistant structures. Hospitals and medical centers were equipped with state-of-the-art equipment. Small businesses flourished again thanks to mutual support within the community. Tourism grew as visitors came to learn about the history of the city. Guides told emotional stories, honoring those who perished and celebrating those who remained. Joplin became a destination of inspiration and resilience. Families that once lived in Joplin continue to keep memories alive through photos, recovered objects, and written accounts. Some moved away but maintained contact with friends and relatives who chose to stay. For many, Joplin will always be home, even if they no longer live there. The strength of the Joplin people is the subject of motivational talks and studies in social psychology. The legacy left by this tragedy goes far beyond destruction. It is a lesson in courage and unity. The psychological impact of the disaster was profound. Many residents developed post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and mental health professionals worked tirelessly to assist the traumatized population. Children were especially affected. Teachers received specialized training to deal with traumatized students. Therapies in groups helped adults and children alike deal with loss and pain. Religious leaders offered comfort and spiritual refuge. Churches and temples became places of shelter, prayer, and connection. Faith played an important role in healing, offering meaning and strength to those who had lost so much. Months after the tornado, Joplin began to show signs of renewal. Houses reappeared where there had been only bare earth. Streets were paved again. Makeshift schools became permanent educational centers. The reopening of the St. John's Regional Medical Center symbolized the city's ability to heal itself. Teachers, many of whom had been directly affected by the disaster, returned to their roles with renewed passion for education. For children, seeing their school environments rebuilt felt like watching their world being put back together, one step at a time. Small businesses began to rise again. Stores that had been torn down reopened in new formats, some in different locations, others maintaining the same name and history, but with new walls and new dreams. Bakers and restaurant owners reopened with updated menus, offering familiar flavors with comforting tastes. Essential service providers like pharmacies and auto shops became reference points in the new daily life of the city. Economic diversification ensured a less vulnerable and more connected local market. The union between neighbors strengthened permanently. People from across the country came to help, staying for weeks or months, offering tools, materials, and housing. Locals, even with their own losses, offered help to those in even worse situations. This culture of mutual support became an inseparable part of the city's identity, shaping a new way of coexistence based on empathy, respect, and collaboration. Joplin discovered, in the darkest moments, the true power of solidarity. Even though many were grieving, the community never stopped helping each other. Voluntary efforts multiplied, creating a sense of belonging stronger than before. People learned to value each other, every moment, and every achievement. They understood that life is fragile, but also resilient. And above all, they realized that even in the face of the greatest storms, the human heart can continue beating. The impact of the tornado was not only physical, it was deeply emotional. Families were torn apart, homes were erased from the map, and dreams were shattered in minutes. Many lost loved ones without even having time to say goodbye. Others watched their houses, businesses, and memories being taken by the wind. Although debris could be removed, emotional scars remained for a long time. In the days that followed, sadness overwhelmed the residents. People sat on the ground among the ruins, holding damaged objects as if they were fragments of something that no longer existed. Others walked silently through the streets, staring around as if trying to understand where they were. For many, it felt like waking up in a strange world where nothing made sense anymore. Emotions ranged from shock, despair, anger, and even guilt, especially among those who survived while others did not. Psychiatrists and psychologists specialized in post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, began working in the first days, offering support to the most affected victims. Support groups were created in community centers, churches, and makeshift schools, allowing adults and children to express their feelings in a safe environment. Many cried during sessions, mentally reliving the scariest moments of that fatal afternoon. Some had constant nightmares. Others woke up startled by any sound resembling the roar of the hurricane. Children were especially affected. For them, losing a home or a family member could mean the complete breakdown of their worldview. Many developed intense fears of storms, running under tables at the sound of thunder or refusing to sleep alone. Mental health professionals used playful and artistic techniques to help them deal with pain. Drawings, games, and group storytelling allowed them to express what they couldn't put into words. In addition, teachers received specialized training to recognize signs of distress in classrooms and offered daily emotional support. For adults, the impact was equally profound. Many had built their lives in Joplin over decades, raising children, starting businesses, making friends. Suddenly, all of that disappeared. Some faced identity crises, questioning whether they were still the same people they were before the tornado. Others struggled with feelings of powerlessness, unable to accept that so many losses could have been avoided. But even in despair, stories of resilience emerged. People who had lost everything began rebuilding their homes with their own hands. Entrepreneurs decided to restart their businesses in new spaces. Families adopted orphan children, offering them love and protection. Religion also played a fundamental role in emotional healing. Churches, even with their structures compromised, opened their doors for prayer meetings, memorial ceremonies, and spiritual support gatherings. Pastors and priests visited makeshift shelters, offering comforting words and hope. In many cases, faith became the only stable emotional anchor in the middle of the storm. Prayer groups met regularly, seeking collective strength to move forward. This spiritual union helped thousands find meaning in pain and believe that, even after chaos, life could continue. Despite all efforts, some residents chose to leave Joplin. It wasn't easy to live in a place so marked by tragedy. For some, every corner reminded them of someone who had left. For others, simply looking at the sky caused anxiety. They decided to start over in other cities, where they could breathe cleaner air, less burdened by painful memories. Part of these families maintained contact with Joplin, returning for annual ceremonies and seasonal visits, but never moved back. The decision, although difficult, was understandable and respected by the community. While this happened, those who stayed faced a constant adaptation process. Many learned to live with the absence of their loved ones. Some began writing letters to the deceased as a way of maintaining connection. Others organized photo albums and kept personal items as mementos. There were those who spoke aloud to the dead, as if they were still there. These simple rituals were crucial in helping with mourning and restoring a new emotional balance. Solidarity also emerged as a great force for healing. Neighbors who barely knew each other before began forming deeper bonds. Volunteers helped one another clean yards, raise walls, and rebuild roofs. Unexpected friendships arose from the rubble, based on the shared experience of survival. This spirit of unity was essential for the city not to succumb to collective depression. It was in these small gestures, an outstretched hand, a comforting word, a shared meal, that Joplin began to heal from within. However, not everyone could overcome the pain so easily. Some withdrew into prolonged isolation, avoiding social contact and rejecting help. Others developed deep depression, losing interest in continuing their routines. There were cases of people abandoning their jobs, neglecting self-care, and spending years unable to resume normal life. Fortunately, support groups and mental health services expanded over time, ensuring that no one was left behind in the recovery journey. One of the greatest emotional challenges was dealing with the feeling of injustice. Why did some people survive and others did not? Why was one neighborhood completely destroyed while another remained intact? These questions, with no clear answers, generated frustration and even anger among some residents. Many sought scientific explanations, others turned to faith, and many simply accepted that some things have no explanation. But regardless of belief, everyone shared the same search for meaning, and that search alone was already part of the healing process. At the same time, art and culture emerged as powerful tools for emotional expression. Local artists created murals, sculptures, and paintings depicting Joplin's journey, transforming grief into creation. Writers published books about their experiences, recording feelings that seemed impossible to put into words. Musicians composed songs about pain, hope, and rebirth. These cultural expressions not only helped the authors deal with their own trauma, but also served as bridges of connection between residents. Local and national media closely followed these emotional changes. Journalists interviewed survivors, showing their stories with depth and sensitivity. Documentaries explored the psychological impact of the disaster, highlighting both the challenges and achievements of the city. Social networks filled with emotional testimonials, where people shared their journeys of mourning and overcoming. This coverage helped keep global attention focused on Joplin, ensuring the city's story would not be forgotten. But above all, Joplin learned to value life in a different way. After the tornado, many residents began seeing time differently. Each day was more valuable. Each person mattered more. Each moment was more precious. Conversations that had once been postponed now happened. Hugs that had been quick now lasted longer. Friendships that had been superficial now became deep. The tragedy taught that life is fragile, but also resilient, and that even in the face of the greatest storms, the human heart can continue beating. The emotional and human impact of the Joplin tornado will never be fully measurable. It touched each family uniquely, leaving invisible but deep marks, shaping a new way of living among the residents. But just as the city was physically rebuilt, it was also rebuilt internally. With pain, yes, but also with courage, love, and determination. And it was precisely this legacy that became the focus of reflection. How Joplin became a living example of memory and collective rebuilding. Joplin proved that preparation is essential. While many communities affected by natural disasters have experienced prolonged mental health crises, Joplin heavily invested in psychological support from the first days. Community centers, schools, and churches hosted therapy groups to help adults and children process their losses and find meaning in pain. Professionals received specialized training to deal with collective trauma, and recreational activities were introduced to help youth express difficult emotions. This holistic approach influenced public policies in other countries, encouraging governments to prioritize emotional well-being after major tragedies. The impact of the reconstruction also spread economically. Many small businesses that had previously been threatened found new opportunities during the recovery phase. Artisans, masons, electricians, and architects saw their demand increase exponentially, generating jobs and stimulating local production. Microcredit programs and tax incentives helped families and entrepreneurs restart their activities. The result was a more diversified economy, less vulnerable and better connected to the regional and national markets. Joplin also became a tourist destination of memory. Curious visitors from other parts of the country began to arrive, eager to understand how an entire community managed to rise again after losing so much. Tour guides, often tornado survivors themselves, shared emotional stories about the event and its aftermath. Museums dedicated to the disaster were created, displaying recovered objects, striking photos, and real testimonies. This new dynamic brought not only visitors, but also important financial resources that helped further boost the local economy. The media continued to closely follow the city's evolution. International documentaries were produced about Joplin's case, showing how the community dealt with the tragedy and which were the key factors for its recovery. Books were written, reports were published, and lectures were given across the country. Social networks continued to share real stories of overcoming, keeping the memory alive and ensuring the event continued to inspire people around the world. But perhaps the greatest legacy was the strengthening of community spirit. Joplin discovered, in the darkest moments, the true power of solidarity. Volunteers who came from other parts of the country stayed for weeks or months, offering tools, materials, and housing. Locals, even with their own losses, offered help to those in even worse situations. This culture of mutual support became an inseparable part of the city's identity, shaping a new way of coexistence based on empathy, respect, and collaboration. Joplin showed the world that you don't need to be a metropolis to be extraordinary, that even a quiet town, without famous historical landmarks or monuments, could teach valuable lessons about courage, determination, and humanity. Residents learned to value each person, each moment, and each achievement. They discovered that life is fragile, but also resilient. And above all, they understood that, even in the face of the greatest storms, the human heart can continue beating. The city also became a reference in environmental education. School programs were restructured to include lessons on disaster prevention, urban sustainability, and climate adaptation. Children learned early to recognize danger signals, act calmly in emergency situations, and value nature as both a source of life and a potential risk. Lectures with experts were introduced regularly, and community projects encouraged reflection on how human actions affect the climate and vice versa. This early awareness ensured future generations grew up with a more responsible and prepared view of the world around them. Despite all the progress, Joplin never forgot that the healing process is continuous. Even years after the tornado, there are those who still carry emotional scars, who still visit therapists regularly, and who still cry when hearing the sound of heavy rain. But even so, the city continues forward, with patience and compassion. There is no rush for everyone to move on at the same time. Instead, there is space for each person to process the trauma at their own pace, always with the support of the community. And it is in this combination of pain and hope, of memory and future, that Joplin's true legacy lies. It is not only a city that faced a tornado, it is a symbol of resilience. Not only did it rebuild, it renewed itself. Not only did it heal, it inspired. And above all, it taught the world that even when everything seems lost, there is always a path ahead. A path that can be walked with courage, united by the strength of the community. Joplin is today much more than a city that faced a tornado. It is proof that human resilience is infinite. It is a reminder that even in the most adverse circumstances, we can find reasons to continue. And it is a call for all cities, anywhere in the world, to learn from the past, prepare for the future, and never stop believing in the collective capacity for overcoming. And that message remains stronger than ever.